Hello, everyone. Good to be with you tonight. Love seeing you. Hi, Jim Hammond. It's great to have you here tonight with us. Tonight, I'm going to read Peter's First Battle, chapter 12 of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I hope you enjoy it. This afternoon at tea time, we talked about tramp art, which is a really interesting subject, at least for me. It's considered the most democratic creation of art, and it was originally done by itinerant people with a knife and would whittle and then make objects. The first ones were called Crown of Thorns, and they made round picture frames that were layered with small pieces of wood. If you go to At Home with Jerry on Facebook or on this Facebook Live, or it'll be posted there, and then tonight and last night's are posted on YouTube as well as At Home with Jerry. So now we will start. Chapter 12, Peter's First Battle. Oh, by the way, it's too warm outside to have a fire, so I was out in the sun all day. You can see I'm kind of burned, and it was really warm. So we'll have a fire tomorrow night. It's going to be cooler. As we read this, I want you to think about some of the images that Lewis mentions in this chapter. There's a lot about the coming of spring, and we're right in the middle of that, even though we're all quarantined. And I want you to think about three things: sounds, touch, which we can't do much, but we can out in the yard, and flowers, and smell, fragrance. Those are very important parts of how we experience the sacred space of our world. And tonight's reading really parallels with the weather outside and the setting sun. And I just would encourage all of you to get outside, even if for a few minutes, and smell the roses, as they say, and a lot of other things. Peter's First Battle. While the dwarf and the white witch were saying this, miles away the beavers and the children were walking an hour on hour after hour into what seemed a delicious dream. Long ago they had left their coats behind them, and by now they had even stopped saying to one another, "Look, there's a kingfisher," or "Oh, I say, there are bluebells," or "What was that lovely smell?" or "Just listen to that thrush." They walked on in silence, drinking it all in, passing through the patches of warm sunlight into cool green thickets and out again into wide mossy glades where tall elms raised the leafy roof far overhead, and then into dense masses of flowering currant bushes and among hawthorn bushes where the sweet smell was almost overwhelming. I can actually smell that right now. I love the smell of berries, especially the raspberries and others, and strawberries when they're ripe on the vine. They had been just as surprised as Edmund when they saw the winter vanishing and the whole wood passing in a few hours or so from January to May. They hadn't even known for certain, as the witch did, that this was what would happen when Aslan came to Narnia. But they all knew it was her spells which had produced the endless winter, and therefore they all knew when this magic spring began that something had gone wrong, and badly wrong, with the witch's schemes. After the thaw had been going on for some time, they all realized that the witch was no longer able to use her sledge. After that, they didn't hurry so much, and they allowed themselves more rests and longer ones. They were pretty tired by now, of course, but not what I'd call bitterly tired, only slow and feeling very dreamy and quiet inside, as one does when one is coming to the end of a long day in the open. That's how I feel tonight. It's a lazy evening because it's warm and beautiful. Poor Susan had a slight blister on one heel. They had left the course of the big river some time ago, for one had to turn a little to the right. That meant a little to the south, to reach the place of the stone table. We're going to learn about the stone table tonight. It's really amazing. Even if this had not been their way, they couldn't have kept to the river valley once the thaw began, for with all that melting snow, the river was soon in flood, a wonderful, roaring, thundering yellow flood, and their path would have been underwater. And now the sun got low, and the light got redder, and the shadows got longer, and the flowers began to think about closing. Do you ever think flowers yawn? I do. I got a yawn. I think flowers yawn. Not long now, said Mr. Beaver, and began leading them uphill across some very deep, springy moss. It felt nice under their tired feet, in a place where only tall trees grew very wide apart. The climb coming at the end of the long day made them all pant and blow. I climbed 2 hills today. It was really a lot of work. That's why I'm tired. And just as Lucy was wondering whether she could really get to the top without another long rest, suddenly they were at the top, and this is what they saw. They were on a green open space from which you should look down on the forest spreading as far as one could see in every direction, except right ahead. There, far to the east, was something twinkling and moving. By gum, whispered Peter to Susan, the sea. In the very middle of this open hilltop was the stone table. It was a great grim slab of gray stone supported on 4 upright stones. It looked very old, and it was cut all over with strange lines and figures that might be the letters of an unknown language. They gave you a curious feeling when you looked up at them. The next thing they saw was a pavilion pitched on one side of the open place. A wonderful pavilion it was, especially now when the light of the setting sun fell upon it. With sides of what looked like yellow silk and cords of crimson and tent pegs of ivory, and high above it on a pole a banner which bore a red, rampant lion fluttering in the breeze which was blowing in their faces from the far-off sea. Can you imagine that? It's just so beautiful. What a beautiful sight. So you have visual sight, you have smell, you have the feeling of wind, you have all kinds of things. It's really a multi-sensory experience. It's important, I think, when things have slowed down, like I hear birds more than I have before, and I want to get back to the story, but I really would encourage you all to listen and to smell and to see, because there are things you won't listen and smell and see when things get busy again. Thank you all for coming. I'm not waving because I'm reading, but I'm waving at you. Hi. I'll wave at the end to everyone. So the 10 pegs of ivory, and high above it a pole on a banner which wore a red rampart fluttering in the breeze which is blowing in their faces from the far-off sea. While they were looking at this, they heard a sound of music on their right, and turning in that direction, they saw what they had come to see. Aslan stood in the center of the crowd of creatures who grouped themselves round him in the shape of a half-moon. There were tree women there, well women, dryads and naiads as they used to be called in our world, who had stringed instruments. It was they who made the music. There were 4 great centaurs. The horse part of them was like huge English farm horses, and the man part was like a stern but beautiful giant. There was also a unicorn and a bull with the head of a man, and a pelican and an eagle and a great dog. And near to Aslan stood 2 leopards, of whom one carried his crown and the other his standard. But as for Aslan himself, the beavers and the children didn't know what to do or say when they saw him. People would have not been in Narnia sometimes think that a chance to be good and terrible, people who have not been in Narnia sometimes think that a thing cannot be good and terrible at the same time. If the children had ever thought so, they were cured of it now. For when they tried to look at Aslan's face, they just caught a glimpse of his golden mane and the great, royal, solemn, overwhelming eyes. And when they found they couldn't look at him and went all and then they found that they couldn't look at him and went all trembly. Ooh, pretty scary. Go on, whispered Mr. Beaver. No, whispered Peter, you first.
Yes?
The son of Adam's before animals, whispered Mr. Beaver back. Excuse me, my phone, my Alexis is talking to me. She's come into the room. Sorry about that. I don't know how she got in here. I want to talk to you, not to Alexis. Son of Adam before animals, let's go back here. But as for Aslan himself, the beavers and the children didn't know what to do or say when they saw him. People who would have not been in Narnia sometimes think that it's a good thing. It cannot be bad and terrible at the same time. If children ever thought so, they were cured for it now. For when they tried to look at Aslan's face, they just caught a glimpse of the golden mane and the great, royal, solemn, overwhelming eyes. And they found that they couldn't look at him and went all trembly. Go on, whispered Mr. Beaver. No, whispered Peter, you first. No, sons of Adam before animals, whispered Mr. Beaver back again. Susan, whispered Peter, what about you? Ladies first. No, you're the eldest, whispered Susan. And of course, the longer they went on doing this, the more awkward they felt. Have you ever done that? I think I have. Then at last Peter realized that it was up to him. He drew his sword and raised it to the salute, and hastily saying to the others, "Come on, pull yourselves together," he advanced to the lion and said, "We have come, Aslan." "Welcome, Peter, son of Adam," said Aslan. "Welcome, Susan and Lucy, daughters of Eve. Welcome, he-beaver and she-beaver." His voice was deep and rich, and somehow took the fidgets out of them. They now felt glad and quiet, and it didn't seem so awkward to them to stand and say nothing. "He has tried to betray them and joined the White Witch, O Aslan," said Mr. Beaver. And then something made Peter say, I wonder what Peter said. Let's see what he said. "That was partly my fault, Aslan. I was angry with him, and I think that helped him to go wrong." And Aslan said nothing, either to excuse Peter or to blame him, but merely stood looking at him with his great unchanging eyes. And it seemed to all of them that there was nothing to be said. "Please, Aslan," said Lucy, "can anything be done to save Edmund?" "All shall be done," said Aslan, "but it may be harder than you think." And then he was silent again for some time. Up to that moment, Lucy had been thinking how royal and strong and peaceful his face looked. Now it suddenly came into her head that he looked sad as well. But next minute that expression was quite gone. The lion shook his mane, clapped his paws together. Terrible paws, thought Lucy, if he didn't know how to velvet them, and said, "Meanwhile, let the feast he prepared, ladies. Take these daughters of Eve to the pavilion and minister to them." When the girls had gone, Aslan laid his paw, as though it were velveted, it was very heavy, on Peter's shoulder, and said, "Come, son of Adam, and I will show you a far-off sight of the castle where you are to be king." And Peter, with his sword still drawn on his hand, went with the lion to the eastern edge of the hilltop. There a beautiful sight met their eyes. The sun was setting behind their backs. That meant that the whole country below them lay in the evening light. Forest and hills and valleys winding away like a silver snake the lower part of the great river. And beyond this, miles and miles away, was the sea, and beyond the sea, the sky full of clouds which were just turning rose color with the reflections of the sunset. But just where the land of Narnia met the sea, in fact, at the mouth of the great river, there was something on a little hill shining. It was shining because it was a castle. And of course, the sunlight was reflected from all the windows which looked toward Peter and the sunset. But to Peter, it looked like a great star resting on the seashore. "That, O man," said Aslan, "is Cair Paravel of the Four Thrones, in which you must sit as king. I show it to you because you are the firstborn. You will be high king over all the rest." And once more Peter said nothing, for at that moment a strange noise woke the silence suddenly. It was like a bugle, but richer. "Is it your sister's horn?" said Aslan to Peter in a low voice. So low as to be almost a purr, if it's not disrespectful to think of a lion purring. For a moment Peter did not understand. Then when he saw all the other creatures straight forward and heard Aslan say with a wave of his paw, "Back! Let the prince win his spurs," he did not understand, and setting off running as hard as he could to the pavilion. And there he saw a dreadful sight. The naiads and the dryads were scattering in every direction. Lucy was running toward him as fast as her short legs could carry her, and her face was as white as paper. Then he saw Susan make a dash for a tree and swing herself up, followed by a huge gray beast. At first Peter thought it was a bear. Then he saw that it looked like an Alsatian that was far too big to be a dog. Then he realized it was a wolf standing on its hind legs with his front paws against the tree trunk, snapping and snarling. All the hair on his back stood up on end. Susan had not been able to get higher than the second big branch. One of her legs hung down so far that her foot was only an inch or two above the snapping teeth. Peter wondered why she did not get higher, or at least take a better grip. Then he realized that she was going to faint, and that if she fainted, she would fall off. Peter did not feel very brave. Instead, he felt he was going to be sick. Poor Peter. But that made no difference to what he had to do. He rushed straight up to the monster and aimed a slash of his sword at the side. The stroke never reached the wolf. Quick as lightning, it turned round the wolf, its eyes flaming and its mouth wide open in a howl of anger. If it had not been so angry that it simply had to howl, it would have got him by the throat at once. As it was, though all this happened too quickly for Peter to think at all, he had just time to duck down and plunge his sword as hard as he could between the brute's forelegs into its heart. Then came a horrible, confused moment, like something of a nightmare. He was tugging and pulling, and the wolf seemed neither alive nor dead, and its bare teeth knocked against his forehead, and everything was blood, heat, and hair. A moment later, he found that the monster lay dead, and he had drawn his sword out of it and was straightening his back and rubbing the sweat off of his face and out of his eyes. He felt tired all over. Then after a bit, Susan came down to the tree. She came down the tree. She and Peter felt pretty shaky when they met, and I won't say there wasn't kissing and crying on both sides, but in Narnia, no one thinks any worse of you if you do that. That's not the way it is here. Quick, quick, shouted the voice of Aslan. Sorry. Centaurs, eagles. I see another wolf in the thickets. There, behind you. He just darted away. After him, all of you. He will be going to his mistress. Now is your chance to find the witch and rescue the fourth son of Adam. And instantly, with a thunder of hoofs and beating of wings, a dozen or so, the swiftest creatures disappeared into the gathering darkness. Peter, still out of breath, turned and saw Aslan close at hand. You have forgotten to clean your sword, said Aslan to Peter. It was true. Peter blushed when he looked at the bright blade and saw it all smeared with the wolf's hair and blood. He stooped down and wiped it clean on the grass, then wiped it quite dry on his coat. Hand it to me and kneel, son of Adam, said Aslan. And when Peter had done so, he struck him with the flat of the blade and said, Rise up, Sir Peter Bane. Rise up, Sir Peter's wolf's bane, and whatever happens, never forget to wipe your sword. And I'm talking. Also, never forget to wipe your hands or wash your hands and sanitize them every time you touch something from somewhere else, and to be thoughtful of others. This series, both the fireside readings and the tea time curating meetings, will continue at least through the quarantine and maybe thereafter for sure, pretty sure. So I encourage you all to look up past ones, and tonight's will be posted as well. And you can find them on At Home with Jerry, and as I said last night, The Joke's on Us. My producer, my daughter Abigail, and my technical director Nathan suggested that name, which I like a lot. So all of these will be posted on At Home with Jerry. We're just working the kinks out. But The Joke's on Us, because I've always joked about the Victorian Edwardian tradition of At Home, which went way before that. And At Home was an afternoon where individual invitations were taken by livery by butlers in livery on carriages and delivered to the house. Mr. and Mrs. McGillicuddy invite you to come by between 3 and 3:30. You could not come unless you had an invitation. It's a family on show. Kind of like a spare room, like I said today. We've always had a guest room, and my creative anarchy has decided that I'm going to invite myself into a new guest room, which I'm creating for myself, my old bedroom, which is now a guest room for myself to come into. It will include a prayer room, as well as my idea of an interior garden created by paintings, not just landscape paintings, all kinds of paintings. So it's called the mudroom, or the interior garden, or the inner garden, whichever you like. And anyone who I love or loves me is welcome to come into it. I'd like to, including my family, of course, and you who come to visit me. And lastly, this is not tramp art. We'll have another session on homemade objects done by farmers, all kinds of people working on factories, all kinds of people. This is started in the 1860s. Anyway, I don't know, this isn't tramp art, but I think it's hilarious. It's ivory on a stick. I don't know where it came from. It was found in this wonderful collection, and if it stays on the end of the stick, I'll wave it at you. Say good night and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow at 3 for the tea and 7 tomorrow night for the reading. God bless all of you. Thanks so much for watching.